At 65, Robin Roberts remains one of the most beloved and respected figures on American television, a woman whose compassion, courage, and radiant positivity have inspired millions. But behind the comforting smile she brings to Good Morning America each morning lies a story far more painful than most viewers will ever realize. Her journey, marked by unimaginable hardship, private suffering, and life-altering battles, is now being spoken about in a way that has left fans shocked and heartbroken. For years, Robin was the embodiment of resilience, a trailblazing journalist who broke barriers, shattered expectations, and rose to the top of her profession through sheer talent and determination. Yet even as her career soared, her personal life was thrown into turmoil by back-to-back medical catastrophes that threatened not only her future, but her very life. Her first diagnosis stunned the nation. Her second one nearly destroyed her. What Robin faced behind hospital doors was far more terrifying than what viewers saw on their screens. There were nights she wondered if she'd ever return to the job she loved, moments she feared she wouldn't survive, and heartbreaking decisions that changed the course of her life forever. And even after she fought her way back, with strength few possess, the emotional wounds, physical consequences, and unexpected fallout from her illnesses lingered in ways she never anticipated. Recently, new details about her private struggles have emerged, revealing a side of Robin Roberts that is raw, vulnerable, and undeniably human. Her story is not just tragic, it's a powerful reminder of how even the strongest among us can be carrying unimaginable pain behind the scenes. For decades, Robin Roberts has been a familiar and trusted presence in homes across America. Her warm smile, steady voice, and unwavering professionalism helped millions begin their mornings with a comforting sense of normalcy. But what most people never realized was how deeply her personal life had been shaped, and in many ways shattered, by struggles that unfolded far from the bright lights of the Good Morning America studio. To understand the tragedy of Robin Roberts, you have to go back to her early years. Born in Mississippi, she grew up in a home steeped in love, discipline, and resilience. Her parents, especially her father, a Tuskegee Airman, instilled in her the values of strength and perseverance. But even with that foundation, nothing could prepare her for the storms life would unleash later on. Robin's childhood was not one of privilege. She learned early on how to fight for her dreams. Whether it was excelling in school, becoming a standout college athlete, or working her way up in the competitive world of broadcasting, she clawed her way to every opportunity through grit and determination. By the time she joined Good Morning America full-time, Robin had already earned admiration for her talent and professionalism. But what came next was something no amount of training, discipline, or ambition could shield her from. In 2007, she delivered the news that would change not only her life but the emotional landscape of millions who had grown to care for her. She had been diagnosed with breast cancer. It was a moment that forced her to shift from being the storyteller to becoming the story, a role she had never wanted. The diagnosis was devastating. For someone who had spent her career projecting strength, charisma, and calm, Robin suddenly found herself vulnerable in a way she had never experienced. Chemotherapy ravaged her body. Radiation exhausted her. The fear of the unknown became a constant shadow. Yet she faced it all with the same bravery she had shown throughout her professional life, letting viewers into her journey not because she wanted attention, but because she wanted to help others feel less alone. Still, even as she battled cancer publicly, there were private moments of anguish she rarely spoke about. Nights when she lay awake wondering if tomorrow would bring deterioration instead of progress. Days when she questioned whether she would ever regain her strength. And though the world celebrated when she went into remission, Robin knew the fight wasn't truly over. She was forever changed, physically and emotionally. Just when life seemed to be stabilizing again, fate dealt her another crushing blow, one far more complex and terrifying than her first diagnosis. But that part of her journey, and the heartbreak that followed, would soon eclipse everything she had ever endured. Robin Roberts had already survived one of the most terrifying battles of her life, and millions of viewers assumed the worst was behind her. They celebrated her remission, applauded her strength, and admired the courage with which she had shared her journey. But what the public didn't realize was that another storm was gathering, one far more dangerous, far more life-altering, and far more emotionally devastating than the first. In 2012, Robin received news that shattered the fragile peace she had begun to rebuild. Doctors diagnosed her with myelodysplastic syndrome, MDS, a rare and potentially fatal blood disorder. Many people had never even heard of it, but Robin quickly learned its brutal reality. Her bone marrow was failing. Her body, already weakened from previous cancer treatments, was struggling to sustain her life. And this time, the fight wouldn't simply be about enduring treatment, it would require something that was both physically grueling and emotionally overwhelming, a bone marrow transplant. The diagnosis hit her harder than anything she had faced before. She later admitted that she felt blindsided, exhausted, and terrified, not just for herself, but for the people she loved. She had only just begun to feel like herself again. Now she was facing a disease with no guarantees and a recovery process that would take her to the brink. Behind the scenes, Robin tried to stay strong, but the emotional weight was immense. She worried about her family, especially her partner, Amber, who had supported her through every difficult chapter. She worried about her job, fearing that the show she had given so much of her life to might move on without her. And she worried about her fans, who she didn't want to hurt or burden with yet another painful revelation. When she finally went public with the diagnosis, the world rallied behind her, but the kindness and support didn't make the journey ahead any less brutal. The transplant would require months of isolation, strict precautions, and an unpredictable recovery that tested her mentally, physically, and spiritually. One of the most heartbreaking chapters of this ordeal was finding a donor. Robin needed someone whose tissue type matched her closely, something far more complicated than people realize. When it turned out that her own sister, Sally Ann, was a perfect match, Robin broke down in tears. The idea of accepting something so life-saving from someone she loved so deeply was both a blessing and a burden. She later admitted that the gratitude she felt was mixed with fear and guilt, fear of the risks the procedure carried and guilt that her sister would have to sacrifice so much for her. In the days leading up to the transplant, Robin recorded emotional messages for her family, not knowing what the outcome would be. She looked around her apartment, unsure if she'd ever come home to it again. She hugged loved ones extra tightly, not knowing when, or if, she'd see them in person. When the transplant finally took place, the world watched with hopeful anticipation, but the reality was far more grueling than anyone outside her hospital room could imagine. Recovery was slow, painful, and deeply isolating. Her body was fragile. Her immune system was nearly non-existent. Even the smallest infection could be catastrophic. But even as she fought through exhaustion, fear, and the psychological toll of isolation, Robin remained determined. She reminded herself every day that she had survived before, and she clung to the belief that she could survive again. What she didn't know was that the emotional consequences of this second battle, the ones hidden from the cameras, would follow her long after the physical scars healed. Robin Roberts' bone marrow transplant was successful, but the aftermath brought a different kind of suffering, one that couldn't be captured in a single update or public statement. While fans rejoiced over her improving health, Robin entered a period of emotional and psychological turmoil that she had never anticipated. The world expected a triumphant comeback. What she faced instead was a long, painful journey through fear, fragility, and profound self-doubt. Physically, she was a shadow of the vibrant broadcaster viewers recognized. The treatments had weakened her in ways even she struggled to understand. Her immune system was fragile, her body exhausted. Every movement required effort. Simple tasks, walking upstairs, getting dressed, even brushing her hair, felt monumental. She couldn't appear on television, and she couldn't have visitors without risking infection. Weeks turned into months of isolation, and with each passing day, she felt her identity slipping further away. Robin, the athlete, the trailblazer, the national morning show anchor, she suddenly felt disconnected from all the things that had defined her. The woman who once spoke confidently to millions was now trapped in a quiet, sterile room, confronting fears she had no way to outrun. And those fears went beyond her health. She worried about her future. Would her voice still have strength? Would viewers still care? Would she ever return to the vibrant life she had before? These questions weighed heavily on her mind. But perhaps the deepest emotional struggle came from something even more heartbreaking: survivor's guilt. As she healed, Robin became painfully aware of how many people with MDS and other blood cancers never get the second chance she received. She had a sister who was a perfect match, something incredibly rare. Others were not so lucky. She heard stories from patients who passed away waiting for a donor or whose bodies rejected their transplants. She met families who never saw their loved ones come home. And each story carved into her heart, making her ask, "Why me? Why did I survive when so many didn't?" She carried that guilt silently for months, even as she put on a brave face for updates shared with her fans. Behind closed doors, she broke down more than once. Some days, she felt strong and grateful. Other days, she wondered if the overwhelming weight of her emotions would ever ease. Then came another struggle, one that caught her by surprise. Returning to work. When Robin finally re-entered the Good Morning America studio, everyone expected the moment to be triumphant. And on the surface, it was. She smiled, she thanked fans for their support, she spoke about gratitude and hope. But deep inside, she felt fragile and exposed. The studio lights felt harsher than before. Her energy wasn't the same. She worried constantly about getting sick. Every handshake, every hug, every crowded space made her anxious. What most people didn't realize was that Robin was still dealing with chronic fatigue and a weakened immune system. She had to take medications that affected her sleep and mood. Some days, she woke up feeling too weak to get out of bed, but pushed herself because she feared disappointing others. Her emotional resilience was tested again when she experienced lingering side effects of treatment, side effects that sometimes made her question whether she would ever feel whole again. She often wondered if she'd return to work too early, but she also feared the alternative, that she might lose the career she had built through decades of determination. Even as she stood in front of the camera, Robin silently battled with the reminders of everything she had lost: her confidence, her physical strength, her sense of normalcy. The transplant had saved her life, but it had also changed it forever. And the most heartbreaking chapter, the unexpected tragedy that hit her personally, years later, was still to come. By the time Robin Roberts reached her mid-60s, many believed she had already weathered the worst storms life could send her way. She had battled cancer, survived a rare and deadly blood disorder, endured a bone marrow transplant, and clawed her way back to the Good Morning America anchor chair with a level of resilience that inspired millions. But even with all she had overcome, an unexpected tragedy, far more emotional than medical, would cast a long shadow over her later years. The years after her transplant were supposed to be her period of peace, healing, and rediscovery. But Robin quickly realized that survival came with a cost. Her body remained fragile, even if she tried to hide it. She experienced flare-ups, extreme fatigue, and days where her energy simply disappeared. She put on a brave face at work, but the toll was undeniable. Yet it wasn't the lingering medical complications that devastated her the most, it was loss. In 2021, Robin suffered a deeply personal and heartbreaking blow: the death of her beloved mother, Lucimarian. Though the world had come to love Robin for her strength on television, those who knew her personally understood that her mother was her anchor, her counselor, her shield, and her greatest source of encouragement. Lucimarian had been the steady voice in Robin's life from childhood through every crisis, offering wisdom and unwavering support. Losing her left Robin gutted. What made the pain even sharper was its timing. Robin was still recovering physically and emotionally from her MDS battle when her mother's health began declining. She was forced to confront the reality that while she had fought so fiercely for her own life, she could not fight the march of time taking away the person she loved most. Robin spent her final days with her mother in a quiet, intimate goodbye that she later described as both beautiful and devastating. After her mother's passing, Robin spiraled into a period of grief that collided with the unresolved trauma of her illnesses. She admitted privately that she felt unmoored, as though she had survived so much only to face her greatest heartbreak when she was at her most vulnerable. The emotional wounds reopened the fear, the fragility, and the guilt she had carried for years. Professionally, she forced herself to keep going, delivering the news every morning even when her own heart felt unbearably heavy. Viewers noticed she was quieter, softer, more reflective. Some chalked it up to age. Others assumed it was simply maturity. But those close to her knew better. Robin was grieving deeply while still pushing herself to be a source of comfort for others. In interviews, she spoke about resilience, gratitude, and perspective, but she often avoided mentioning the full weight of the emotional toll she was carrying. The physical scars of her medical battles had healed, but the emotional ones remained tender. Even today, at 65, Robin Roberts continues to inspire millions, yet she does so while managing the lingering effects of chronic health challenges, the pressure of her high-profile career, and the profound heartbreak of losing the person who meant the most to her. Behind the strength, behind the smile, behind the image of a woman who beat the odds, lies a reality far more human and far more tragic. Robin's story is not just about survival, it's about the quiet, unseen wounds that follow even the bravest fighters. It's about how a person can endure unimaginable storms yet still carry the weight of them long after the world assumes the skies have cleared.